Nolan Arenado, after months of trade speculation, is a St. Louis Cardinal. What a wild ride it was. He's Trevor Rosenthal. I'm Katie Woo. Welcome to Cardinal territory. At long last, Trevor, we have some clarity. Nolan Arenado arrived to Jupiter, Florida this morning around 7 a.m. He reported to Cardinals camp for the time being, at least the immediate future. He is a St. Louis Cardinal. What do you got, Trevor? Did you see this as a possible reality for this organization?
I was leaning more towards him getting traded just because that was the narrative for such a long time. I mean, this started as soon as the 2024 season ended. But as time went on, I mean, I think we talked about it. I mean, it's really all we've had to talk about because the Cardinals have said all offseason our plans hinge on the destiny of Nolan Arenado. We will not make any moves, any additions until we have some of that payroll relief. And so here we are. Arenado is in camp. I guess the coin flip, our 50-50 coin flip has finally landed. And now here we are. Not a bad thing. Nolan Arenado, great third baseman. He definitely makes the team better. Whether or not the priority of this team being the best it can be is at the top of the list. I think, we have some stuff to talk about there, but at least we have that clarity.
You're exactly right. We talked to Ollie Marmol this morning, and he said we have one of the best third basemen to ever play the game walking into camp. I'm super excited he's here. John Mozeliak said, simply put, Nolan makes us a better baseball team. And we had a chance to talk to Nolan this morning outside of the media complex. And he said, pretty much all he needed to say, that he's a St. Louis Cardinal. And if he's going to be here, he's going to commit to being here. While neither him nor Mo ruled out revisiting a potential trade maybe later in the season, right now the Cardinals are moving forward with Nolan as their third baseman. Let's talk about how they got here in the first place, though, because some events transpired over the last 4 days that really solidified Arenado's place in St. Louis. So let's see. Reported to Cardinals camp, he said, I'm a ball player. I'm really focusing on getting ready for the season. The one thing about this place, I'm very comfortable, and that's going to help me get ready for the season. He is comfortable as a St. Louis Cardinal. This will be his 5th season. However, up until Wednesday, whenever Alex Bregman signed, there was virtually, a lot of speculation on where he was going to go. So we talked to Mo on Tuesday. Pitchers and catchers officially reported, and he said, hey, we're still open-minded. There are some places that we think we can trade Nolan. And without naming it, it was pretty clear that it was Bregman or Boston, because we've spent the last 8 weeks talking about how Alex Bregman more or less is controlling Nolan Arenado's destiny. Late Wednesday night, news breaks from The Athletic's Chandler Rome, host of Crush City Territory, that Alex Bregman is signing with the Boston Red Sox on a 3-year, $120 million deal. And that pretty much put the kibosh on any Nolan Arenado trade, because Boston at this point seemed like the last option. So we know that Nolan gave Mo a list of 5 teams. We don't know all 5 teams on it, but we know the Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Dodgers were all destinations that he would look to approve and waive his no trade clause should that happen. And obviously Boston is off that list now with Bregman signing there. So now Nolan's here. He said that he had plenty of time to prepare and talk and think on his cross-country flight from Southern California to West Palm. And now that he's here, he's ready to go. Is this an ideal situation for anyone? I wouldn't say that, just because both sides were pretty clear that they agreed moving on was the best possible outcome for both parties. Is it a bad thing to have a 8-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glove Award winning third baseman back in camp right now? I don't think so at all. And I can tell you, walking into that clubhouse today, every player and coach was very excited to see him.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a bad thing, and especially for the Cardinals, for Ollie Marmol as a manager. I'm excited. I agree with that. I'm excited to see Nolan Arenado walking through the doors any day. And then for Nolan, there's a reason, and he's talked about this, that there were only a handful of teams that he would be comfortable making that transition to, and kind of reading between the lines. I mean, St. Louis seems like a comfortable place for him. He seems happy there. I mean, I'm a big fan of the St. Louis Cardinals organization and the city, the fans, the ballpark, all those things. It's a great place to play as a player. I think he mentioned that he doesn't he's not a huge fan of the organization rebuilding or pulling back or not being all in. And so, I'm sure he would rather be in a place where it's like, hey, we're all in, we're trying to win, and we want you to be a part of that. But the one thing that I don't like, and this might be a little bit of a hint of more to come this year, and I think that this falls onto the shoulders of John Mozeliak. We're in this transition period. We have this dual-headed president of operations for the team, and maybe this is a little bit of foreshadowing of what's going to be happening throughout this season, of saying one thing and then something else kind of happening. And by no means is this going to taint the success that Mozeliak has had in his tenure. But I think for the avid fan, the casual fan, you do wonder, like, oh, we said that we were going to trade this guy. We said we were moving in a different direction, and that didn't happen. I'm sure there's going to be a casual fan in the stands at Busch Stadium on May 5th that thinks, wait, I thought Arenado was traded. Why is he still out here at third base? Not that they're going to be disappointed, but I think in this year specifically, it's going to create some questions, maybe leave a little bit of a shadow on Mozeliak that he doesn't necessarily deserve. But that seems to be how it's playing out right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, and I think we've talked about this before, Mo has always kept his negotiations really out of the press. And while it makes my job harder, it's probably the smarter play, right? So for him to come out at the winter meetings and say, no, we certainly intend to move Nolan Arenado, I was like, this is not how we usually operate. And I think why he said that was because the organization was confident that a trade would happen, right? And it didn't. And it was proved to be a lot harder than I think anyone envisioned, especially once Nolan said no to the Astros. And he has his reasons for doing that. He did not, he neglected or declined to explain like why that was not a suit for him. He declined to elaborate on the 5 teams that he chose, but he also said that he is not going to expand that list any further, citing the fact that, he has a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. He has a family. He doesn't want to just uproot them out of anywhere. So it really was only going to move if it made total sense to him. And Mo can only do so much with that. John Mozeliak's job is to find the best possible trade for the St. Louis Cardinals, not the best possible trade for Nolan Arenado. Now, Nolan's no trade clause means that obviously Mo has to work within the parameters of the rights that the player earned. Sometimes the Venn diagram of those two things have a very small overlapping circle. And I think that's what we saw with the Cardinals. Is it a great look to spend 4 months proclaiming that you're going to trade arguably one of your best players? I know, offensive decline aside, Nolan Arenado, in my opinion, is a Hall of Famer. To say that you're going to do that for 4 months and then have him report to spring training certainly does make for an awkward situation. But to everyone's credit involved today, Ollie Marmol, John Mozeliak, Nolan Arenado said all the right things. They met actually at 7 a.m. before media at 8:35 this morning, just to make sure everyone was on the same page and talk things out and make sure there were no gripes. And everyone described the conversations as friendly. I think Mo went as far to say they were cordial, professional, and he even joked. He was like, I hope when I see you, Nolan, that I get a hug. And he did confirm that there was a hug. So yes, it's not ideal. And I think we've talked about this a lot. There is some fan apprehension with John Mozeliak, maybe some fan fatigue, and this whole reset transition. That's his word. He likes to use this as a transition. He made it very clear. He will be referring to the 2025 season as a transition year, not a reset. So let the record show that. It makes it a little difficult. And there's already a bunch of apathy about the state of the organization right now. Last year's record, the lack of spending in free agency this offseason, the overall just maybe sentiment that the Cardinals are running back last year's roster and not making any changes. So I get it. But now I think the question goes from what are the Cardinals going to do with Nolan Arenado to what are they going to do with him and how does it impact the rest of the roster? And that's something that both Mo and Ollie spoke to at length this morning, saying, yeah, this changes our calculus a little bit. We have to figure out how to give opportunity and runway, the 2 biggest themes of the offseason. Can we actually ensure that? And I don't know, Trevor, if you're a fan and you're thinking management now all of a sudden has to pivot back and redo their foundation of what they built the entire offseason on, what are you thinking as a fan?
Well, I mean, first you look at Nolan Arenado, and we know him very well at this point. He's been around for a long time, and he even said it in his quote, I'm a ball player. So you better believe as long as Nolan is capable, he's going to show up and expect to be in the lineup, in the middle of the lineup, playing third base every single day, rain or shine, day game or night game. He likes to play baseball. And as a fan, that kind of goes against the grain of what we've been hearing and creating different opportunities. If you have a player that's guaranteed to eat up 90% of the playing time that's available throughout this season, well, what happens to the Nolan Gormans and the Donovans, the Sagaces, these players that the Cardinals were looking to give opportunity and really find out and see what they have going into this transition year, and then hopefully building upon that in 2026. So as a fan, I'm mixed emotions. Of course, winning solves all things. So hopefully we can be on the right side of the scoreboard early and often. But other than that, I think, like I said earlier, it's going to create and add to this tension in this final year of the John Mozeliak regime.
Yeah, that's to me the big takeaway. And I thought that Ollie Marmol had some really interesting answers to this. I asked, there is a lot of roster flexibility, position flexibility within how the current roster projects. And obviously on February 16th, there are still 6 weeks of games to get through. Some of these rostered logjams are going to solve themselves. Performance, competition, and unfortunately injuries all play a part in the spring training roster and how that gets set for opening day. But I asked him, based on last year, he did such a nice job of utilizing the flexibility of his roster and putting guys in different positions every day. And he had almost a different lineup every day. I asked him if that was going to be something similar that he used to ensure at-bats. And his answer was telling. It was completely different. Let me pull up the quote for you. He said, "It'd be my preference not to bounce people around for the sake of at-bats. So that's where we need to figure out what this really looks like and how to do it best." So earlier, I was processing maybe they could start Gorman at second or make him a DH, put Donnie at second, switch Siani and Lars around in the outfield. It certainly sounds like they want solidified positions, and it's certainly not going to be the exact same lineup every day. Left-handed and right-handed platoons exist. But it certainly sounds like the Cardinals want a relatively set lineup, and that's going to include Nolan Arenado at third base. Again, stop asking me if they're going to bench him. No, they're not going to do that. They still want to win games, and you're also not going to bench a Hall of Fame third baseman who still has, in my opinion, plenty left in the tank to really fix the last 2 years. You have Contreras at first. They want at-bats for Walker. They want at-bats for Gorman. They want at-bats for Newbar. Donovan and Mason Wynn look poised to have the same workload as last year. So the guys that are really going to be impacted by this, the guys who the Cardinals really have to make decisions about with the way things currently stand today, are Alec Burleson, Michael Siani, Victor Scott II, Lucan Baker, and Thomas Saggese. Those 5, I think, are in the biggest risk of maybe either losing playing time or potentially starting the season in AAA. And that's something that the Cardinals are going to have to decide. And the big thing for them this year is figuring out what position players they want to carry into 2026. Can they do that with Nolan Arenado still on the team? I believe that. I do think so. But it's going to have a trickle-down effect to some of the fringe players on the roster.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about the roster shaking itself out, you talked about, performance and health, all these factors that, well, guess what? 29 other teams are going through that same process this spring training and into the season. And I would say, talk negatively about how they've been open about the conversation of Arenado being traded and it didn't come to fruition. Well, maybe the one positive of that marketing technique is if something happens in one of these other 29 camps, you better believe Nolan Arenado is going to be on the top of the mind of the front office, the coaches, and even the players. I mean, the players pay attention to this, and that to me is an interesting scenario to keep an eye on. And it's also kind of humorous to me to think about putting myself in Arenado's shoes, or even as a teammate of Arenado when he shows up today and walks through those doors. And I like that you pointed out they were very professional. This could have been handled in a number of different ways. So it was great to see that they were there early. They were able to smooth things over and get on the right track for everybody. I mean, there's no reason to drag this out in a negative way at any point, but that's a huge positive. But I just imagine being in that clubhouse and seeing Arenado walk through the doors. There would be some good jokes and some good humor. I think that could happen around that. So I agree, Katie, that there's a lot still to see how this shakes out. And we haven't even had our first game yet. We're getting close.
Getting close. First full squad is tomorrow.
First full squad tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I've been seeing some live action. Unfortunately, I saw, unfortunately or not, Pedro Pajes take our boy Quinn Matthews over the fence today. Oh, man.
He called it in the clubhouse. He said he was feeling good for lives. He's like, I got Quinn. I feel good. And first pitch, opposite field, right center, cleared it. Outfield too, and you could see him. He was feeling real good about himself. Pedro Pajes is going to do the show pretty soon, so we can grill him about that. Now we got to get Quinn Matthews on. But yeah, no, and Pedro was one of the players that I talked to this morning who was like, man, I'm so happy that Nolan's back. And was it a little weird seeing Nolan walk out to the media patio in Cardinal red? I was like, yeah, that's not the red I thought you'd be wearing. I thought maybe you'd be wearing like Boston Red Sox red. But again, can't say enough about how he handled the situation. And I'm going through quotes up on The Athletic right now. We have the full interviews with John Mozeliak, Ollie Marmol, and Nolan Arenado. And one quote that really stood out to me and how it was not just what he said, but how he said it. It really kind of solidified to me how motivated he is to be better than last year. We asked him if it was weird at all being back here. And he said, did I sit here in the offseason and think I wasn't coming back? No, I knew there was always a chance of me coming back, so I'm prepared to be here. The one thing about this place, St. Louis, I'm very comfortable. I know it. That's going to help me get ready for the season, and I'm in the right place mentally. I feel ready. I have a lot to prove. And then he said this line, Trevor. He said, last year was not what I want Cardinals fans to know me as, so I see this as an opportunity to change that. Now, remember, we're just 2 seasons removed from when he was third place in the National League MVP voting, had a great year in 2022. But with the 2023 and 2024, he'd be the first to say, are so disappointing. Do you think that Nolan Arenado is not motivated, not only by his play the last 2 years, or by the fact that teams that he wanted didn't want him and kind of thought that he wasn't worth the money or not worth the hassle to trade for him? That is, and the way he just said it, like, this is not what I want Cardinals fans to remember me as. He doesn't want to be remembered as the third baseman who fell off a cliff after 2022, or the third baseman that was traded away and didn't get a chance to prove that he does have this bounce back setting in him. I'm excited to see what that looks like because I think he's going to start the season in St. Louis, and it's just a matter of time, before we do this all over again, honestly. But for the time that he's here, I think we're going to see a really improved Nolan Arenado, and I think that's something that fans could be really excited to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should be excited about it. I mean, he seemed, we mentioned following him through the offseason, the stuff that he shared on his social media accounts, but whether he was going to be in St. Louis or have a fresh restart or a fresh opportunity, he wanted to make the most of that. And so hopefully with the Cardinals in the position they're in, they end up being the beneficiary of that refocus and the attention to improving himself upon whatever he saw that he needed to improve upon from the previous season. And to the effect, we're talking about the Cardinals going through a transition and a rebuild, however we want to frame it. When Arenado was asked about that question of like, how do you feel about the state of the organization? And he said, I think it's what's best for the Cardinals. He said, is it what's best for the Cardinals? Probably. And I think that to me was interesting to hear his perspective. And as a player, it can be hard to have a holistic view because you're so focused on what you're doing. And especially in Arenado's situation, just focused on where you're going to be. But the fact that he's cognizant not only of his own performance, but the state of the organization, again, I think the Cardinals benefit from this. I think he can come in with the outlook that he wants to leave a good impression on this fan base. He wants to be a positive contributor, not just in performance, but realizing there's a next generation of player. There's a next core group of players coming up through this system, and he can be a big part of shaping the direction of those players for years to come. So I thought that was interesting to see. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch him get started and get into some games. Hopefully he just kills it. Hopefully he's the Arenado that we saw in 22 and throughout his whole career. And we get the pleasure of watching him play.
And they are a better team with Nolan Arenado at third base than without. I think you're spot on with what you said. Nolan did say, I think this is probably the direction the Cardinals need to go in. He's not the only veteran to have said that. Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras have said the same. So I think there is buy-in about the organization's direction. This transition year, if you will, may not be the easiest to stomach for fans, and I certainly understand that. But I don't think it's going to be as drastic of maybe a drop-off as we first envisioned in October. Essentially, they're just running the 2024 roster back without Paul Goldschmidt. And I can see both sides of that. I can see being excited because it means that maybe you'll be able to contend. Again, the Cardinals won 83 games last year with a really bad offense. And I have zero reason to believe that offense will repeat itself. At the same time, it's hard to get excited about a transition when you don't see a lot of actual transition taking place. So that's why how this spring goes and how different opportunities will factor into the lineup and the roster is really interesting to me. We'll see, Trevor. But hey, look, there's some clarity. We can finally put this to rest. After 4 months of the back and forth turmoil, we know, at least for now, Nolan Arenado is a St. Louis Cardinal, and the Cardinals can move forward from there.
Our question has been answered. At least we had something to talk about all offseason. Not necessarily.
We did have one thing.
We had one thing.
One whole thing. Yep. And here we are now, finally some resolution on February 16th. But the great news is, to our loyal listeners at Cardinal Territory, we have lots to talk about now, and we have lots of exciting guests. So next week, St. Louis Cardinals manager Ollie Marmol is joining the show. He's going to be our very first guest interview. And if you haven't listened to Ollie's interviews to start the spring on different various media platforms, I would highly encourage you to. I think he's done such a nice job at explaining the direction of this team and his vision for it. I'm certainly excited to get into it with Trevor this week. And then we'll have Gordon Graceffo, our first player interview. He's scheduled to join the show next week as well. And lots of fun things in the works. So we promised you that it would pick up. So thanks for sticking around. Definitely some good things coming in the works. And of course, first full squad tomorrow. So we'll get a chance to see what this Cardinals team really looks like as early as Monday. That is exciting.
Yes. I'm glad you're there, Katie. You're getting a lot of good feel for what's going on in the organization. I'm excited to talk to the manager. I mean, Marmol, this will be a lot of fun. And then to get some of the players on too. I think that'll help us give us like a vibe check, right? Like,
yes.
How are these guys feeling? What are they talking about? What's the excitement level? So a lot to look forward to.
We'll hope you join us. You can like and subscribe to our page on YouTube if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. And you can find us on Spotify and Apple. We'll be back with you next week. Lots of fun guests, lots of fun things in store. Baseball is back, and we're getting to it. For Trevor Rosenthal, I'm Katie Woo. This is Cardinal Territory.